Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki, Sharma, Upadhyay. Let's get started. Two weeks since Kabul fell, who is in charge of Afghanistan? When the Americans leave tomorrow, the August 31st exit deadline, will the evacuation from the Kabul airport continue? Will the world recognize this new Taliban government? Will they engage with them? Will women's rights be upheld? Or will there be collateral damage in the deal struck between the US and the Taliban? I'm afraid we don't have answers to these questions and many more. But as we track the Afghanistan story, some things are amply clear. The chaos is set to continue, and the words and statements of world leaders sound hollow, even hypocritical. The Taliban are on a PR offensive. They're making all sorts of promises. The West is in a rush to leave. Precision strikes are killing innocent civilians. And terrorists are talking like statesmen. On Gravitas tonight, we'll bring you ground reports and analysis. We'll also tell you about America's ninja bomb, the Hellfire R9X missile. For the longest time, the US kept this weapon a secret until it recently used the missile to kill what they call ISIS-K terrorists in Afghanistan. Where is India in the Afghanistan game? 100 countries have been talking to the Taliban for the past 2 weeks. India is not on that list. Can New Delhi ignore the Taliban? Should they look at working with a terrorist organization that clearly has loyalties with Pakistan? We'll get you a special report on India's options. The Taliban, as we said, are on a charm offensive, making promises, holding meetings on women's rights, trying to portray themselves as an evolved group, or what the world is calling the Taliban 2.0. We look at their actions, not just their words. And who legitimized the Taliban? How did it go from being a terror group to a legit party? The United States is retweeting and quoting the Taliban. Not too long back, the two were fighting on the battlefield. On Gravitas tonight, we bring you the story of betrayals. We begin, as always, with Gravitas Global Headlines.
US media reports suggest that 9 members of one family, including 6 children, were killed in a US drone strike targeting an ISIS-K suicide bomber in a Kabul neighborhood. The US acknowledged later that there were reports of civilian casualties following the strike. The UN nuclear watchdog warns that North Korea appears to have restarted a nuclear reactor that is believed to have produced plutonium for atomic weapons. This is considered to be a signal of the nation expanding its banned nuclear program. A study says that a new variant of the virus, which causes COVID-19, has been detected in South Africa and other countries, which could prove to be more infectious and even evade vaccine protection. In what could lead to an escalation in tensions in the region, Israeli aircraft struck Hamas sites in Gaza in response to incendiary balloons launched from the Palestinian enclave. Palestinian groups are protesting at the Israel-Gaza border to urge Israel to ease restrictions on the enclave. New Zealand reports its first recorded death linked to the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine due to a rare side effect. Meanwhile, Japan suspends the use of some Moderna jabs after the country reported 2 deaths linked to the use of the contaminated vaccines. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro says that he has 3 alternatives for his future: being arrested, killed, or victory. These remarks come as the president has been threatening to not accept the results of next year's presidential election. China cuts down the amount of time those under 18 years can play video games for. Beijing says there is a need to curtail a growing addiction to video games. Minors are forbidden from playing video games for more than 3 hours a week. 16 years after Hurricane Katrina pummeled the United States, Hurricane Ida wreaks havoc across the state of Louisiana, causing massive destruction. One person has died while New Orleans was left without power. India's Paralympic stars have delivered 2 golds and a bumper haul of 5 medals on day 5 of the Tokyo Games. 19-year-old shooter Avani Lakara became the first woman gold medalist from the country, with a world record showing in the final of women's 10-meter air rifle standing SH1 classification. Sumit Antil then broke his own world record 3 times on the way to a stunning gold in the men's javelin F64 by 44 classification. Patrick Cantley has won the PGA Tour's BMW Championship after a spectacular duel with Bryson DeChambeau that lasted 24 holes. Both players entered the final round tied for the lead and remained in a deadlock at 27 under after a topsy-turvy 18 holes in which the lead changed hands several times. Cantley forced a playoff with a birdie on the final hole, but still needed 6 extra holes to finally beat DeChambeau and take over the lead in the FedEx Cup standings.
The Kabul airport was targeted again this morning. Terrorists from the ISIS fired 6 rockets towards the airport. Thankfully, no one was hurt this time. Most of the rockets were intercepted. But the terrorists are becoming more ambitious by the day. Today, they drove to a location close to the airport. They were inside a residential neighborhood, firing rockets from a launcher mounted on a car. This is the story of Afghanistan under the Taliban. Terrorists driving around Kabul with rocket launchers. The next 24 hours are critical. The United States will end its evacuations by tomorrow. U.S. intelligence inputs say another attack is highly likely. Who is going to intercept it? What are America and its allies doing about this? Well, nothing, because they're trying to meet their exit deadline. They have 24 hours left to leave, so they will get out and leave everything into the hands of the Taliban, including the Kabul airport. The transfer of controls is happening. The Taliban have begun taking charge of the airport gates. Our correspondent Anas Malik today went back to the same site where the bomb went off last week. The area used to be flooded with people trying to leave the country. Today it's deserted, with the Taliban guarding some gates. Take a look at this.
I'm standing at the barren side of the Kabul International Airport. This is the military side. These checkposts are those which had U.S. soldiers stationed, and you would see them. Now, just one of these checkposts or watchtowers is where I am witnessing, or I can see it. Perhaps if the camera person can show you as well. There are U.S. soldiers who are stationed. The day of the blast, when I came over here, beyond this point, this place towards my left, where you see the Taliban now, this was in control of the British Army, and here there were people who were waiting. Now, with the Britishers having left, this entire entrance to the hotel, to the barren gate, is now under control of the Mujahideen or the Taliban. If my camera person can follow me, and these are protective shields that have been left by the Britishers, which are also now in control of the Taliban. These were supposed to be riot gears. They would hold them and move forward, and now they are now in control of the Taliban. You'd see plenty of Taliban men who are now guarding the entrance to the Abbey Gate, the exit to the Barron Hotel, and onwards to the entrance of the Abbey Gate, where the heinous blast took place on the 26th of August.
So America's departure is on track. They're running away from Afghanistan as quickly as they can. Meanwhile, the terrorists are moving in and they're rebuilding their base in the country. Here's one of them. Amin ul Haq, a senior leader of the Al-Qaeda, also a former aide of Osama bin Laden. He is now back in Afghanistan. Amin ul Haq returned to his native Nangarhar province in what looks like a really expensive SUV. Just look at how this Al-Qaeda leader is being greeted by locals. They know who is going to be in charge in the weeks ahead. Terrorists, some of them pretending to be statesmen. The Taliban are putting together what they call a government. Reports say they have finalized the cabinet. Two people are calling the shots in government formation. One is Sirajuddin Haqqani, the leader of the Haqqani network, also a terrorist sanctioned by the United Nations. And Mullah Muhammad Yaqub, the son of the Taliban founder Mullah Omar, the head of the Taliban's military commission now. These two have been assigned to quote-unquote finalize names for the cabinet. Who is handing out these assignments? Hibatullah Akhundzada, the elusive supreme commander of the Taliban and possibly the emir of the new Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. Last week, we repeatedly asked a question, where is Akhundzada, alive or dead, in Afghanistan or in Pakistan? Now the Taliban have responded. They say Akhundzada is very much in Afghanistan, but they haven't answered our next question, which is, why is he hiding? If he is there, why isn't he coming out? Does he plan to rule his country from the shadows? No answer. They say Akhundzada will approve all the names for the cabinet himself. What will this cabinet look like? Key members of the Taliban are guaranteed a place, we are told. The cabinet could have more than 26 members. It is expected to include all members of the Rehbari Shura, which is the leadership council of the Taliban. It's the most important decision-making body of this group. How will the world treat this terrorist regime? Will they lift sanctions against the Taliban? Will they be treated like statesmen, given visas to travel around the world? Will they represent Afghanistan at the United Nations? Well, we don't know. The permanent members of the United Nations are meeting later today. But don't get your hopes high. Remember, the UN does not even designate the Taliban as a terror group. France is pushing for the creation of a safe zone. We'll keep track of the developments for you. The fall of Kabul, we know, coincided with the fall of a superpower. America's blunders are criminal. Its lies are being called out. Its weapons are in the hands of terrorists. Its evacuation from Afghanistan is a mess. Its complete disregard for allies is shameful. Its intelligence, or the lack of it, is killing innocent people. And its blind revenge is not even sparing children now. On Sunday, the Americans launched a drone strike on Kabul. Their target? A vehicle belonging to a suspected Islamic State bomber. He was apparently heading to the Kabul airport for another suicide attack. The US took him out with an unmanned drone. Applause all around. The Pentagon Central Command posted this self-appreciation message. This is what they said. We are confident we successfully hit the target. Significant secondary explosions from the vehicle indicated the presence of a substantial amount of explosive material. That's a lot of confidence, especially for a country that has no soldiers on the ground, no army bases to spy from, and no embassy to relay data. How can the US be so sure that they got the right man? As it turns out, there is a good chance they did not. Our correspondent Anas Malik visited the blast site. He talked to the family that owned the targeted car. They know nothing about ISIS Khorasan or about a suicide attack. They were just an ordinary Afghan family.
The US has alleged that they were to do with the IS Khorasan. You said you lost your brother. Is there any connection with that?
No, it's a mistake. It was a big mistake that you're doing. That our neighbors know about us that. He is worked as an engineer with NEI organization for 17 years. And also he has some international travel to making matching. He was an engineer, technical engineer.
That's what the family say. The car belonged to an engineer, they say. He had been working with a Japanese firm for 17 years. The US says he was a terrorist. Which version do you believe? Well, honestly, we can't say. But there's an indisputable reality here. The US did not just kill a suspected terrorist. They killed his family too. Our correspondent was shown pictures of young children, some of them as young as 2 years old. What was their crime? Interfering with the US strike or playing outside their own home? Multiple local accounts corroborate what this family said: America got the wrong man. Soon the Pentagon went into damage control. This is the latest statement. And I'm quoting again: a large amount of explosive material inside the car had caused additional casualties. We would be deeply saddened by any potential loss of innocent life. Too late for that. The US should have considered this before bombing a busy Kabul street. They acted on half-baked intelligence, and now at least 10 innocent people are dead. Who answers for these deaths? Not America, because they are busy dehyphenating the Taliban and terrorists. Last week, the State Department spokesperson was asked about the Haqqani network, whether the US was coordinating with them on security. Do you know what the spokesman said? He said the Taliban and the Haqqanis are two separate entities.
McKenzie said that the Defense Department is sharing versions of information with the Taliban, and there's some coordination on security. Does that coordination extend to members of the Haqqani network who are also providing security?
No, it does not. The Taliban and the Haqqani network are separate entities.
Well, just to be clear, that wasn't some foreign policy rookie. That was the State Department's spokesperson. The Haqqani network is the sword of the Taliban. They're in charge of security in Kabul, but America says they're separate entities, and this is not an intelligence failure. This is a lie. Haqqani network chief Sirajuddin Haqqani is the Taliban's deputy leader. His father was a close ally of Taliban co-founder Mullah Omar. This is all common knowledge. So why is America denying it? To save face, the Haqqani share close ties with Al-Qaeda and ISIS Khorasan. Both are sworn enemies of the United States. That same United States is coordinating with the Taliban on Kabul security and anti-terrorism. Beat that. All these lies and compromises to get revenge for fallen American soldiers. Their bodies returned to the United States on Sunday. President Joe Biden was there to receive them, but he seemed to be in a hurry. As the coffins came down one by one, Joe Biden was busy glancing at his watch. What exactly was he checking for? What could be more important than receiving your fallen troops? There's a lot of backlash on social media. Here's a veteran who served in both Iraq and Afghanistan. And let me quote from what he said. Looks like Biden was being inconvenienced by having to show some respect for these American heroes. That's exactly what it looks like. An inconvenienced commander-in-chief fumbling his way through Afghanistan, arming terrorists, killing civilians, and laying the ground for another 9/11-like attack. We told you about the airstrike that went wrong. Now let's tell you about the weapon behind it. Its official name is the Hellfire missile, but it's better known as the Ninja bomb. The Americans developed it to strike without hurting innocent civilians, for a precision strike. But it looks like the missile ended up doing exactly that. Our next report tells you more about the Hellfire.
December 2019. A terrorist was on the loose in Syria. The United States deployed a missile to kill him. The target was a car. The missile found it. It tore through its roof. 3 terrorists were killed almost instantly. But the car they were in didn't blow up because the missile didn't have a bomb inside. Instead, it has sharp blades on its head. They come out once they detect the target. This is the Hellfire R9X missile, better known as America's Ninja bomb. For several years, America has kept this weapon a secret. In the last 3 years, there have been just 11 confirmed cases where this weapon was used. But with its latest missile strike in Afghanistan, America has sent a message. It doesn't want to hide this weapon anymore. So what can the Hellfire do? It was designed to kill targets with precision while avoiding civilian casualties. Just like a sniper with a long range, the weapon is a drone. It uses GPS technology to travel to its targets, The head of the missile is equipped with 6 sharp blades that are designed to crush targets. The blades are released shortly before impact. The weapon is not handled by a soldier on a battlefield. The American forces have a special team of drone operators. They can fire this missile anywhere and on anyone from within the borders of the United States. So far, they have sent these missiles to conflict zones in Syria, Afghanistan, Libya, Somalia, and Yemen. The weapon has been used on high-value targets. One of them was Abu al-Khair al-Masri, a deputy leader of the Al-Qaeda. He was killed in Syria back in 2017 using the same weapon. Al-Masri was traveling in a car in northwest Syria. The weapon hunted him down and struck on the vehicle's roof. Al-Masri died, and this is what was left of his car. But the same level of precision was missing in Kabul. The drone was flown from the Persian Gulf to Kabul. Its target was ISIS terrorists who were apparently planning more attacks. Pictures from the scene of the strike show 2 badly damaged vehicles inside a home. Eyewitnesses say that they saw a large blast that shook the entire neighborhood.
This is the Khoja Bogra neighborhood, and we live here. A rocket came and hit a house, and 5 or 6 people died. I have nothing else to say, and we are distraught.
America has a reputation for hurting civilians through its drones while going after terrorists. Going by one estimate, the United States has carried out more than 14,000 drone strikes in the last 2 decades. These strikes could have killed up to 2,000 civilians. The new series of Hellfire missiles was supposed to put an end to that, but it looks like they too are as fatal as any other weaponized drone. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Let me ask a question that everyone is asking. What has the US achieved after 20 years of war? What's the biggest highlight? They removed the Taliban from power to replace them with the Taliban. Plus, they gifted the Taliban an air force, a complete fleet and latest weapons. And if you think this is a one-off, then think again. The world over, America has armed terror groups, some by design, others by default. I'll start with the Taliban. Look at their new air defense capabilities. The first video is from the Kandahar airport. This one. It features 2 iconic pieces of US military hardware, the C-208 transport aircraft, which costs $2 million each, and the MD-530F helicopter, cost $2.4 million each. Both are now in the Taliban's hands. How many do they have? Well, we cannot say. Here's a second video, though. This one is from the Herat airport. It shows the Taliban boarding 2 Mi-17 HIP helicopters. The lowest price for this aircraft is $16.4 million per unit. $16.4 million. Here's another video, again from the Kandahar airport. It shows the Taliban with 2 American UH-60 Black Hawk helicopters, cost $5.9 million each. Next video from the Mazar-e-Sharif airport. It shows the Taliban posing in front of another MD-530F helicopter. I'll repeat the cost, $2.4 million. These are big, expensive war machines, and we don't know how many of these are with the Taliban now. The Afghan Air Force was operating a fleet of at least 167 aircraft, all developed and supplied by the United States of America. This included 43 MD-530 helicopters, 33 C-208 transport planes, 33 UH-60 Black Hawks, 23 A-29 light attack planes, 32 Mi-17 helicopters, and 3 C-130 Hercules aircraft. And these are the official figures, released by the US Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction. How many of these 167 are with the Taliban? Well, there's no official figure. Some of them were flown out of the country, but according to independent websites, most of these aircraft have been geolocated within Afghanistan, meaning they're still there, either with the Taliban or some other terrorist group. What will they do with this fleet? They don't know how to fly them, but they know how to force pilots to fly them. A lot of Afghan pilots have stayed behind in the country. They might be getting job offers they're not allowed to refuse. It's a dangerous situation. Scary. Terrorists in control of state-of-the-art weapons. Who is to be blamed for this? The country that wages wars to support its arms manufacturers, the United States of America. Now, Washington says that these aircraft were meant for Afghan forces. Sure they were. But did the Americans really expect the Taliban to rule the country and not touch the American war chest? Last week, 69 US lawmakers wrote to President Biden asking him questions like these. Does he have a plan to ensure the Taliban do not get nuclear weapons? They haven't got an answer, and they should not hold their breath. The fact is, America routinely arms terror groups. Wherever they go, whichever country they invade, their weapons always end up in the hands of non-state actors. In 2014, the US airdropped weapons and supplies in the Syrian border town of Kobane. The weapons were meant for Kurdish fighters. They ended up in the hands of the Islamic State. The ISIS even released a video thanking Washington for the gifts. 2019, an investigation in fact revealed that arms provided by the US to Saudi Arabia and the UAE ended up in the hands of Al-Qaeda and a variety of terror outfits in Afghanistan. You can look up the details on how exactly this happened. The same year, 2019, there was another revelation, this time in Yemen, where American-made weaponry had fallen into the hands of rival militia groups. What did they do with it? Used it against the US-backed government in Yemen. The arms even flowed into Tehran, where US weapons were reportedly studied and copied by Iranian intelligence. Then they were provided to the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. What for? To target American interests. I could go on, but you get the point. And here's the thing. It's true that wars are unpredictable. Sometimes weapons can end up in the wrong hands, but you can't make a habit of it. And when you do, you are the biggest threat to the world, not the terrorists who wield those weapons. The United States is a repeat offender. It fails to control guns at home. It fails to safeguard its weapons abroad. Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Iran. American weapons have routinely fallen into the hands of terror groups and rogue nations. And now they have provided the Taliban with an air force in Afghanistan. Guess who poses the biggest threat to the world in the name of bringing democracy? And all those weapons mean one thing. You cannot ignore the Taliban anymore, especially if you live in the neighborhood. India has tried using this strategy. Focus on the evacuations for the moment. Deal with the Taliban later. That's not an option anymore, not for long. Tuesday is the last day of US presence. After that, the Taliban will take over the airport. What happens then? Indian nationals are still stuck in Afghanistan. The foreign ministry does not have an exact number, but the fact is the job is not done. It's far from over. India will have to run more evacuation flights from Kabul. Who will provide the security? The Taliban have made a categorical promise to 100 countries. They promise safe passage for foreign nationals and Afghans with travel documents. 100 countries have cited this promise for whatever it's worth, a terror group making that promise. India is not one of them, though. Neither are China and Russia, but both those countries, China and Russia, are not looking to evacuate their people. India is. Why wasn't India on the list? These 100 countries have been talking to the Taliban since August 15th. That's when Kabul was captured. They needed the Taliban support to evacuate their nationals. India opted for a different strategy. Banking on existing allies in Afghanistan, the likes of former President Hamid Karzai and Abdullah. Reports say India also reached out to Russia. You could say the strategy worked, but it also made India irrelevant in the Afghan power play. If it ever had a chance, that is. Given the Taliban's loyalties. Think about it. America is cutting deals with the Taliban. Their spy chief is meeting with Mullah Baradar. China and Russia have kept their embassies open. They're already talking about infrastructure deals and post-war rebuild. And Pakistan has not stopped smiling since August 15th. And don't get me wrong, India was right to not jump into the Taliban's embrace. But at what point does wait and watch expire? This month was an excellent opportunity for India. It was chairing the United Nations Security Council. India did convene meetings on Afghanistan, yes. but those meetings did not yield very much. I'll give you an example. On the 16th of August, the UNSC released a statement. Let me quote one part of it. Neither the Taliban nor any other Afghan group or individual should support terrorists operating on the territory of any other country. Cut to August 27th. There's a new statement on Afghanistan. Notice how the language changed. No Afghan group or individual should support terrorists operating on the territory of any other country. The word Taliban has been replaced, it's been dropped. It doesn't feature anywhere in the statement. Clearly, world powers are switching strategy. French President Emmanuel Macron talked about this new approach. He says coordinating on evacuations does not mean recognition. There's engagement and there's recognition. That's the difference that they're trying to underline. And this may work for the West, but it doesn't work for India. There are regional dynamics at play for India. Will the Taliban support terror groups in Kashmir? Reports say they already are. Will the Taliban be a proxy for Pakistan's deep state? Reports say ISI commanders are already in Afghanistan. So unlike the West, India has a lot more at stake. New Delhi's response will depend on the Taliban's actions, not their words. Because Taliban 2.0 are masters of propaganda. They're experts in sweet-talking governments, including New Delhi. Taliban leader Sher Mohammad Abbas called India a quote-unquote important country. He says the Taliban want to build good economic and political ties with India. Listen to this.
هندوستان د دې منطقې یو مهم ملک دی او موږ غواړو چې خپل کلتوري فرهنګي تجارتي اقتصادي روابط چې په خوام له هند سره درلود دې ته دوام ورکو او بلکې وده ورته ورکو زموږ تجارت د پاکستان لاره هند د ډیر مهم دی چې د تجارانو ملي تجارانو په مخ باندې خلاص دي هوایي لارې هوایي کوریډور د هندوستان سره باید چې موږ خلاص وساتل شي او دا لازم دی چې باید وشي.
The Taliban also have some advice on Kashmir. Sit down and talk to Pakistan, they say. It's easy for a Pakistani proxy to say. Former warlord Gulbuddin Hekmatyar also spoke on India's role. He basically had one demand, non-interference. He believes that India is keen on supporting the Panchi resistance. This is a man hoping to curry favor with the Taliban, hopefully get a plum position in the new regime. These statements and warnings leave India with few options. Evacuation, in fact, is the immediate problem. Coexistence is the bigger one. India will have to face the reality at some point. One more volatile, untrustworthy neighbor. We already have two of those. But wait and watch cannot be an option anymore. Great players thrive in the thick of the action. If India nurtures global ambitions, now is the time to take a stand. Meanwhile, the Taliban remain on a charm offensive. They're trying to portray a cleaner image. They're trying to convince the world that they're statesmen, ready to be a responsible member of the global community. How are they doing this? By holding friendly press conferences. Much of the discussion on their new image revolves around women's rights and education. The Taliban are trying to reassure women that their rights will not be trampled upon. So we decided to go through some of the promises that they're making to see if they match their actions. On Sunday, and this may sound bizarre, the acting education minister of the Taliban held a consultative meeting in Kabul to decide the fate of Afghan women. Should they be allowed to study or should they be made to stay at home? Of course, those consulted were all men, no women to decide on the future of women. And that's not surprising at all. After the meeting, they said that they'll let women continue their education, but only if the curriculum is in line with their version of the Sharia law. And if the classes are conducted separately for boys and girls, listen to this.
The people of Afghanistan will continue their higher education in the light of Sharia law, in safety without being in a mixed male and female environment. The Taliban wants to create a reasonable and Islamic curriculum that is in line with our Islamic, national and historical values, and on the other hand, be able to compete with other countries.
You heard that. No co-education. You would say this is progressive by the Taliban standards, and we'd say it's hogwash. This is just another way to keep girls out of school. According to a UNICEF report, only 16% of Afghanistan schools are girls only. And even here, the number of girls attending is abysmally low. Most of them don't have proper sanitation facilities or transport. Basically, more hurdles for girls who want to go to school. Now, say they manage to overcome all of this and make it to school. Will these girls be allowed to complete their education? The marriageable age for girls, according to the Taliban, and listen to this, the marriageable age is 13 years. They're already forcing many young children to be Taliban brides. So this whole PR campaign about letting girls study should be taken with a sack of salt. Because look at what they're doing. Not just what they're saying. The Taliban show no sign of having evolved. In their last stint in power, they banned art, music and theatre. What about this time? They're killing artists. Here's the latest one, folk singer Fawad Andrabi, a renowned artist from Afghanistan's Baghlan province. On Friday, he was dragged out of his home and shot dead. Reports say a few days before this, the Taliban visited his home, had tea with him, and now they've killed him. What about journalists? You might remember a journalist who made headlines a few days back. Her name is Behesta Arghan. She worked for Tolo News. On the 17th of August, she became the first woman Afghan journalist to interview a Taliban leader. The images of this interview were shared widely. The Taliban used them to push their promises on women's rights. Why are we discussing her now? Because this journalist has fled Afghanistan, citing dangers to her life. She says she fears the Taliban and what they will do to independent women like her. And she's not alone. According to the owners of Tolo News, almost all well-known Afghan reporters and journalists, a lot of them in fact, have left the country. The ones who remain have to put up with situations like this. Look at this news anchor, forced to parrot the Taliban's message on air, interviewing a commander as armed men stood firmly in the background. This is not parody. This was a real broadcast. The visibly petrified anchor was made to sing praises of the Taliban, tell Afghans to not be afraid and cooperate with them.
آقای غنیم از افغانستان فرار کرده و در افغانستان عده‌ای که منتقد اشرف غنی هستند میگویند که رئیس جمهور فراری و مردم تنها گذاشت و خودشان رفتند و حالا امارت اسلامی برگشته.
A journalist with guns behind him informing the public to not be afraid. It can't be more bizarre, or should I say more tragic than this. And for all the broken promises, all the interviews at gunpoint, the Taliban are frankly unbothered. Do you know why? Because they won the war. And the world always recognizes a winner. It's tragic, but it's also true. The Taliban know that the US is not coming back. And why would they? Washington now has a new and shiny partner in Afghanistan, the Taliban themselves. Who would have seen this 20 years back? The targets of the war on terror are now partners in the same war. They're not terrorists anymore, apparently. They're a group. And one man sums up this flip-flop by the United States. A certain Zalmay Khalilzad, America's special envoy for Afghanistan, he pretended to be Dr. Peace. Having breakfast in Kabul, lunch in Islamabad, dinner in Doha, a lot of jetting around, but nothing to show for it. Wouldn't be a first for Khalilzad. He landed in Kabul in 2001 after the Taliban's ouster. He said it was a massive opportunity for Afghanistan to change.
I'm here on behalf of the President to express our support for the people of Afghanistan as they try to establish a new order here to rebuild their country, to free Afghanistan from the remnants of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. As I said before, this is a moment of opportunity. When the Soviets withdrew from Afghanistan, similarly, it was a moment of opportunity.
He loves that word a lot, it seems. Opportunity. The Soviet withdrawal was an opportunity. So was the Taliban's ouster. And now the American exit. Everything is an opportunity. This is what Mr. Khalilzad is up to nowadays, retweeting the Taliban and quoting Mullah Baradur's deputy on social media. He says the Taliban statements are quote-unquote positive. Even American presidents have changed their tone. Remember, this war started with George Bush. He bullied the Taliban, threatened them, had no problems calling them terrorists. This is what he said. Take a look.
Central goal of the terrorists is the brutal oppression of women, and not only the women of Afghanistan. The terrorists who helped rule Afghanistan are found in dozens of countries around the world. And that is the reason this great nation, with our friends and allies, will not rest until we bring them all to justice.
The Joe Biden of 2001 would have probably agreed with Bush, at least on the terrorism part. But the Biden of 2021 does not have that luxury. Let me play out a clip from earlier this month. This is Joe Biden, US President, crediting the Taliban for helping to evacuate the US embassy.
We've been in constant contact with the Taliban leadership on the ground in Kabul, as well as the Taliban leadership at Dahau. And we've been coordinating what we were doing. That's why we were able, for example, how we got all of our embassy personnel out.
From warnings and threats to constant contact. 20 years is a long time, but don't mistake this for an ideological shift. This is just political convenience. America will deal with just about anyone in power, from hardcore Islamist groups to power-hungry dictators. And every time Washington pivots, poor old Hollywood follows. It's a well-known movie tradition. America's enemies are Hollywood's enemies. Think about it. You have the Nazis, the Russians, the Iranians, and in the last 2 decades, the Taliban. We've had so many movies on Afghanistan, The Outpost, where a band of US soldiers battle hundreds of Taliban terrorists. Lone Survivor, the adventurous hunt for the Taliban's fictional chief, Ahmad Shah. Or 6, the story of a Navy SEAL team chasing a Taliban leader. The list does not end. Now it's time for Hollywood to rethink, perhaps, to rebrand the Taliban as partners. Maybe a joint operation against ISIS. It's Hollywood, you never know. All kidding aside, recognition matters, especially for a group that spent 20 years on the run. It's not desirable, it's not acceptable, but that's how power plays work. If the Taliban had been eliminated, they would have been condemned by history. Instead, they will now be called Afghanistan's rulers. If you think about it, it's a good Hollywood-style plot. Medieval rulers return after 20 years in the wilderness. The Taliban get lead role. And America plays a great supporting actor. Tomorrow, August 31st, is the last day for America's evacuation mission in Afghanistan. And here's what US defense contractors are up to. Putting a price on the lives of Afghans who want to flee Kabul. $6,500 US, that's the amount one has to pay if they want a reserved seat on a chartered flight out of Afghanistan, $6,500. How low can America stoop? At a time when it should be Washington's duty to evacuate Afghans in danger who helped the Americans at some point, free of cost, it is allowing defense contractors to exploit the human tragedy it is responsible for. Our next report has the details.
Seeing what freedom.
Meet Eric Prince, a former U.S. Navy SEAL turned defense contractor. In 1997, he co-founded a private military company called Blackwater, which is now known as Academy. We'll discuss the shady past of this company in a bit. First, you must know about Eric Prince's latest shenanigans. He is offering chartered evacuation flights to desperate Afghans who want to flee Kabul. This move comes as the Biden administration struggles to evacuate Americans and Afghan allies. Just before the August 31st deadline, with the window of opportunity for Afghans closing, in comes Eric Prince with this noble offer. Only that it's the opposite of noble. Mr. Prince is charging $6,500 US for a single seat on a flight out of Kabul. $6,500 US. Plus extra charges. If people are trapped in their homes or stuck at security checkpoints and need assistance getting to the airport. At a time when it should be America's duty to evacuate Afghans who helped Washington in its 20-year war free of cost, Defense contractors like Erik Prince are being allowed to exploit the desperation of Afghans, to milk the chaos to the very last cent. And this inhumane opportunism is just a blip on the overall corruption of defense contractors that have used America's multiple wars like an endless cash cow. Between 1997 and 2010, Erik Prince was awarded $2 billion in government security contracts, most of which were classified. During that same period, he was awarded $600 million in contracts by the CIA for classified missions. What sort of classified work was this? Most of these contracts revolved around providing security to American embassies and bases abroad, a task that was carried out rather brutishly. In 2007, Blackwater agents who were tasked with providing security to American diplomats in Iraq ended up killing 17 Iraqi civilians in the Nisour Square massacre. 4 agents were convicted in 2014, but they were all pardoned by Donald Trump. More recently, Prince, who is also the brother of Trump's former education secretary, Betsy DeVos, was accused of violating the UN arms embargo against Libya by arming a warlord who wanted to overthrow the UN-backed Libyan government. In 2011, an African Union report revealed that Erik Prince was funding and training a group of mercenaries in Somalia to fight America's proxy war against Islamic terrorists. The only problem being that most of these mercenaries were tortured and beaten during their training. Now, this defense contractor is asking Afghans to pay $6,500 for a flight ticket to freedom. Like ravaging the land and the people of Afghanistan wasn't enough. Washington is now letting its coyotes exploit a human tragedy it triggered. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
With that, it's a wrap. We'll keep tracking Afghanistan for you. Thanks very much for watching, leaving you with Gravitas Images.